The Pacific swells rolled endlessly beneath steel hulls. March brought death from the skies above Okinawa. Technology would clash with desperation in ways no naval strategist had imagined. Below deck in the Combat Information Center, phosphorescent light painted ghostly pictures across radar screens. The electronic sweep revealed what human eyes could never see. Death approached at 200 miles per hour from the northwest. Second-class radar operator Patterson watched the glowing display refresh itself every few seconds. His trained fingers adjusted controls with practiced precision. The screen told a story of approaching doom. Multiple aircraft contacts filled the display, bearing 340 degrees, range dropping steadily. More than 50 aircraft inbound. Commander Westholm understood the mathematics immediately. His destroyer had become bait, electronic bait positioned deliberately to draw enemy aircraft away from the main invasion fleet. The radar fence around Okinawa would detect every approaching aircraft. But detection meant nothing without the firepower to destroy what they found. The Imperial Japanese Navy had abandoned traditional tactics entirely. No longer did they seek decisive fleet engagements or strategic maneuvering. Mathematics had replaced honor, one pilot for one ship, one life for hundreds of enemy sailors. The Kamikaze special attack units represented pure calculation. Trade everything for maximum damage to the American invasion force. 16 radar picket stations formed an invisible barrier around Okinawa, each station positioned at carefully calculated distances from Point Bolo on Zamper-Misaki Peninsula. The destroyers steamed in predetermined patterns 15 to 95 miles from shore. 7 stations operated immediately. 9 more would activate as the campaign developed. USS Laffey cut through Pacific waters at steady 15 knots. Her Allen M. Sumner-class hull displaced 2,200 tons of seawater with purposeful grace. Commander Beckton studied the electronic displays in the Combat Information Center. His ship carried sophisticated death in multiple forms. The weapons inventory read like a catalog of destruction. 6 5-inch dual-purpose guns mounted in 3 twin turrets, 12 40mm guns in quad and twin configurations, 11 20mm cannons positioned throughout the ship. But the real revolution lay in the fire control systems that guided these weapons with unprecedented accuracy. Mark 37 gun directors working with Mark 25 fire control radar transformed naval gunnery from art to science. The Combat Information Center represented the pinnacle of American technological achievement in 1945. Multiple radar systems fed information to plotting tables where trained operators created 3-dimensional pictures of the battle space. Air search radar reached beyond 60 miles. Surface search capability extended to 15 miles. Height-finding equipment calculated aircraft altitudes precisely. Fighter direction circuits connected the destroyer to combat air patrols overhead. The integration was revolutionary. Traditional visual gunnery achieved hit rates below 2% against maneuvering aircraft. Radar-directed fire control increased accuracy to 20% under optimal conditions. Proximity-fused shells detonated near targets without requiring direct hits. The defensive mathematics multiplied exponentially. Lieutenant Chickering commanded landing craft support Large 51. His assessment captured the brutal reality. The destroyers were deliberately positioned as attractive targets. Draw the kamikazes away from valuable ships, vector fighters to intercept them. Destroy the attackers before they reached carriers and transports. At Kanoya Airfield on Kyushu, Lieutenant Yukio Seki reviewed final attack orders with pilots of the 201st Air Group. Operation Kikusui No. 1 would launch 355 kamikaze aircraft and 341 conventional bombers against the American fleet. Floating chrysanthemums would bloom in death above Pacific waters. The youngest pilot had seen 17 summers. 7 days of training had taught him basic aircraft identification and formation flying. 2 days practicing takeoffs. 2 days learning to fly in formation. 3 days approaching and attacking target mock-ups. Navigation training was minimal because escorts would guide formations to target areas. Combat maneuvering was irrelevant. Their mission required only the ability to aim aircraft at ships and hold steady through impact. Vice Admiral Onishi had organized the first official kamikaze units in October 1944. Lieutenant Seki had led the first successful attack, sinking USS St. Lo on October 25th. What began as spontaneous acts of desperation had evolved into systematic strategy. The pilots understood American capabilities better than many Japanese commanders realized. The radar picket destroyers controlled more than early warning systems. They directed fighter aircraft that could intercept attacking formations 50 miles from the main fleet. But the picket stations had critical vulnerabilities. Operating in isolation 30 to 60 miles from mutual support, individual destroyers could not concentrate defensive firepower. Determined mass attacks could overwhelm isolated ships before reinforcements arrived. The mathematics favored Japan if execution proved perfect. One pilot and one obsolete aircraft traded for hundreds of American sailors and million-dollar warships. If one kamikaze in 6 struck its target, the exchange rate justified the strategy. Dawn approached on April 6, 1945, with American ships forming defensive perimeters. Each picket station maintained a 5,000-yard patrol radius. The destroyer at the center. 2 to 4 support craft in diamond formation. Speed held at 15 knots. Course changes every 30 minutes complicated submarine targeting. Electronic systems had transformed naval warfare into battles fought on multiple dimensions simultaneously. SC-2 air search radar swept the skies every 4 seconds. SG surface search maintained continuous coverage of ocean approaches. Mark 12 and Mark 22 fire control radars locked onto individual targets for precision gunnery. SP height-finding radar calculated aircraft altitudes for fighter interception. Combat Air Patrol maintained coverage, but distances created critical gaps. 2 F-6F Hellcats or F-4U Corsairs per station during daylight hours. Response time from carriers to outer picket stations required 20 to 30 minutes under optimal conditions. Those minutes would determine who lived and who died. At 300 hours on April 6th, radar operators across the picket line detected the first wave of Kikusui-1. Multiple raids approached from the northwest. The tactical plot showed over 100 contacts converging on radar picket stations. Fighter Direction Officer Lieutenant Adams vectored his combat air patrol to intercept. 2 Corsairs against 30-plus kamikazes. The mathematics were impossible from the beginning. The kamikaze formations had already begun descent toward wave-top height. They used the radar horizon to mask final approaches. On Destroyer Bush, at Radar Picket Station No. 1, the Combat Information Center team tracked incoming raids from multiple directions. Raid 1 showed 40 aircraft bearing 340 degrees. Raid 2 displayed 20-plus bearing 0-15 degrees. Raid 3 remained composition unknown, bearing 285 degrees. Commander Westholm had trained his gun crews for exactly this moment. Continuous tracking of assigned targets. Open fire when aircraft reached 12,000 yards, regardless of solution quality. Maintain maximum rate of fire until targets were destroyed or passed overhead. No ceasefire for aircraft identification. Anything approaching the picket line was hostile by definition. The ordeal began at 1500 hours. After shooting down 2 approaching aircraft, a Nakajima B-6N torpedo bomber broke through defensive fire. The Kamikaze struck between the two stacks on starboard side. Its bomb exploded in the forward engine room. Steam erupted through ruptured lines. 14 men died instantly, but Bush remained afloat. Damage control teams fought fires, while gunners continued engaging incoming aircraft. At 1700 hours, destroyer Colquhoun maneuvered to assist Bush, bringing 4 cap fighters with her. What followed was aerial chaos beyond imagination. 40 to 50 Japanese aircraft swarmed over the two destroyers like angry hornets. Colquhoun took her first hit at 1730 hours. A Zero crashed into her main deck. 3 more kamikazes struck in rapid succession. Commander Wilson ordered abandon ship as Colquhoun broke apart and sank. 35 of her crew were lost. Bush continued fighting despite severe damage. At 1725 hours, a second kamikaze crashed into her port side between the stacks. The explosion nearly severed the ship. At 1745 hours, a third kamikaze struck the port side above main deck. Ammunition began exploding. Fires spread beyond control. At 1830 hours, Bush rolled over and sank. 87 of her 307-man crew were lost, including members of Commander Wilson's staff embarked as Commander Destroyer Division 48. The survivors spent up to 10 hours in oil-covered waters before rescue. LCS L-64 was first on scene at 2130 hours, pulling exhausted men from the sea while under threat of continued air attack. The mathematics of April 6th were staggering in their brutality. In one day, kamikazes sank destroyers Bush, Colquhoun, and Emmons, plus destroyer minesweeper Rodman, and 2 ammunition ships. 10 other ships sustained damage. But the radar pickets had fulfilled their mission with blood and sacrifice. The main fleet at Higuchi anchorage remained largely untouched. The destroyers had absorbed fury meant for the invasion force. USS Laffey arrived at Radar Picket Station No. 1 on April 15, 1945, relieving destroyer William D. Porter. Commander Beckton reviewed the tactical situation with his department heads. The Japanese had shifted tactics after initial attacks failed to achieve decisive results. Small groups infiltrated at dawn and dusk when visibility complicated visual tracking. Individual aircraft used cloud cover and rain squalls for concealment. Coordinated attacks from multiple directions overwhelmed fire control systems designed to track limited numbers of targets simultaneously. Laffey had survived kamikaze attacks at Lingayen Gulf and Iwo Jima, but Okinawa represented different mathematics entirely. Proximity to Japanese airfields on Kyushu and Formosa meant continuous attacks. No respite periods, no safe hours, general quarters from dawn to dusk, and often through the night. On April 16th, the situation developed exactly as Beckton had anticipated. At 0727 hours, radar contact appeared. Single aircraft bearing 020 degrees, range 11 miles. The VAL approached at wave-top height, using morning sun for concealment. Beckton ordered hard right rudder and flank speed. The destroyer heeled sharply as she accelerated past 30 knots. The VAL pilot adjusted his approach angle, aiming for the bridge. Range 2,000 yards, all starboard guns firing. The aircraft absorbed dozens of hits, but maintained course and speed. At 500 yards, a 5-inch shell detonated directly beneath the VAL. The explosion tore off the left wing and sent the fuselage cartwheeling into the sea 50 yards from Laffey's hull. But this was merely the opening movement of a symphony of destruction. At 800 hours, CIC reported multiple raids converging on Station 1. Estimated 50 aircraft in separate groups. CAPI engaging but heavily outnumbered by odds exceeding 10 to 1. What followed was 80 minutes of the most intense combat in destroyer history. 22 kamikaze aircraft would attack Laffey individually and in coordinated groups. The first 8 were destroyed by devastatingly accurate gunfire that had been honed to perfection through months of combat experience. The gun crews had developed rhythm born of desperation and training. Track approaching aircraft with radar precision. Concentrate fire from multiple mounts on single targets. Maintain continuous fire regardless of hits observed. Switch to new targets immediately upon splash. No celebration. No pause. The next aircraft was always seconds away from attack range. At 0827 hours, the 9th Kamikaze overwhelmed defensive fire through sheer determination and luck. A Yokosuka D4Y Judy approached from stern where fewer guns could bear. Despite taking multiple 40mm and 20mm hits that should have been fatal, the aircraft struck gun mount 53. The explosion killed 6 men instantly, including the mount captain, gunner's mate First Class Lawrence Delowski, who had been directing the mount in local control. Fires erupted across the fantail. Ammunition began cooking off in secondary explosions. Mount 53 was destroyed. 1/6 of Laffey's heavy firepower eliminated in seconds. The 10th Kamikaze struck minutes later, while damage control parties fought desperately to contain spreading fires. Another Judy attacking from the port quarter crashed into the afterdeck house. The impact destroyed 2 20mm mounts and their crews. Fire spread toward the after magazine. Damage control parties worked frantically to prevent catastrophic explosion, while gunners continued engaging new attackers approaching from multiple directions. The 11th attacker, a Val dive bomber, dropped a bomb that struck between the stacks, penetrating to the machine shop before exploding. The blast ruptured steam lines and knocked out electrical power to aftergun mounts 42 and 43. Both mounts lost power and had to be operated manually. Rate of fire dropped dramatically just when maximum firepower was most desperately needed. At 0900 hours, Laffey faced her most desperate moment in 80 minutes of continuous combat. 4 kamikazes attacked simultaneously from different directions, overwhelming fire control systems designed to track 2 targets maximum. The first, a Val, crashed into the mount. The second struck the port side near the waterline. The third dropped a bomb that exploded in the after-engine room, flooding compartments and reducing speed. The fourth was destroyed 100 yards from the ship by desperate close-range fire from a 20mm mount, whose gunner, Seaman Arafat Rides, stayed at his position despite shrapnel wounds that would have justified abandoning his post. Laffey was burning from bridge to stern. Her rudder jammed hard left, forcing the ship into continuous circles. Speed reduced to 8 knots. 1/3 of her crew were casualties. 6 gun mounts destroyed or damaged beyond immediate repair. Commander Becton received damage reports from all departments. The situation was critical, but not hopeless. Forward guns still functioned. Damage control teams were containing fires through superhuman effort. The ship remained afloat, despite massive damage to hull and superstructure. When Assistant Communications Officer Lieutenant Manson asked if they should prepare to abandon ship, Becton's response became legendary throughout the Pacific Fleet. "No, I'll never abandon ship as long as a single gun will fire." A nearby lookout added quietly, "And if I can find one man to fire it." 4 more kamikazes attacked in the next 20 minutes. The surviving gunners destroyed 3 through sheer determination and superior training. The fourth, a Zero, carrying a 550-pound bomb, crashed into the base of the forward stack. The explosion lifted the entire bridge structure before slamming it back down. Every man in CIC was knocked unconscious momentarily. When they recovered, thick smoke filled the compartment. Radar scopes flickered and died. For 3 critical minutes, Laffey was blind and mute, unable to detect approaching aircraft or coordinate defensive fire. The 20th Kamikaze approached during this chaos. Without radar warning or coordinated defense, individual gun crews engaged on their own initiative using visual tracking and manual fire control. Gunner's mate, First Class Robert Carr on Mount 44, spotted the Val diving from 8,000 feet. Despite the mount operating in manual mode without power assistance, his crew maintained tracking and fired continuously. The Val exploded 500 feet above the ship, showering debris across the forward deck, but causing no additional casualties. The 21st Kamikaze came from astern, hidden in smoke from Laffey's own fires. A Kate torpedo bomber at wave height, aimed for the forward magazine where a direct hit would have obliterated the entire ship. Seaman Arifat Rides, still at his damaged 20 mm mount, saw the aircraft emerge from smoke 400 yards away. He triggered a long burst, walking tracers into the Kate's engine. The aircraft staggered, nosed down, and crashed 30 yards from Laffey's port side. The explosion drenched the burning destroyer with seawater that helped suppress fires threatening ammunition magazines. The 22nd and final Kamikaze approached at 09:47 hours. By now, Laffey had been under continuous attack for 80 minutes. The crew was exhausted. Ammunition was running dangerously low. Defensive firepower was reduced by 70% from battle damage. But LCS L-51 had been fighting alongside Laffey throughout the engagement. Lieutenant Chickering ordered maximum speed and positioned his gunboat between the Kamikaze and the destroyer. The Val pilot had seconds to choose: continue toward the valuable destroyer target or accept the lesser prize. He chose Laffey. The Kamikaze passed 50 feet over LCS L-51, its fixed landing gear nearly striking the gunboat's mast. Chickering's gunners poured fire into the aircraft's belly at point-blank range. The Val began trailing smoke, then flame. It crashed into the sea 100 yards from Laffey. The battle was over. Laffey had survived 22 Kamikaze attacks in 80 minutes. Hit by 6 aircraft and 4 bombs. 32 killed, 71 wounded. But she remained afloat when mathematical probability suggested total destruction. Her survival seemed impossible against such overwhelming odds, but the mathematics told the real story of technological superiority over desperate courage. Laffey's gunners had fired over 8,000 rounds of ammunition during the engagement. They destroyed 9 kamikazes with direct gunfire and damaged 4 others severely enough that they missed their targets or crashed short. Fire control radar had maintained tracking solutions despite battle damage to primary systems. Proximity fuses had multiplied defensive effectiveness exponentially. The Combat Information Center had coordinated defense even when partially disabled by blast damage. Technology and training had prevailed over sacrifice and determination. The radar picket system at Okinawa represented fundamental shift in naval warfare philosophy. For the first time in maritime history, electronic detection and fire control had become more important than armor thickness or maximum speed. The destroyers stationed around Okinawa were not merely scouts reporting enemy movements. They were command and control platforms managing 3-dimensional battle space extending 60 miles horizontally and 30,000 feet vertically. Fighter direction teams embarked on picket destroyers revolutionized air defense coordination. During the Okinawa campaign, they controlled over 5,000 fighter interceptions, resulting in destruction of approximately 1,100 enemy aircraft before they reached attack positions. The radar had seen what human eyes could not perceive, tracked what human minds could not process simultaneously. Guided weapons to targets in darkness, weather, and smoke with mathematical precision impossible through visual methods alone. But the human cost was staggering in its magnitude. During the 82-day Okinawa campaign, radar picket destroyers absorbed the concentrated fury of Japanese desperation. 15 destroyers and destroyer minesweepers were sunk on radar picket duty. 45 more sustained damage. Over 4,900 sailors killed or wounded on picket stations alone. The destroyers had fulfilled their mission as electronic sentinels and magnets for enemy attacks. They had protected the main fleet by sacrificing themselves in carefully calculated exchange of lives for strategic advantage. On May 4th, Kamikaze attacks sank destroyers Morrison and Luce at Radar Picket Station Number 1. Morrison went down in minutes after being hit by 4 aircraft in rapid succession. 152 of her 331-man crew were lost. The destroyer's radar had tracked incoming raids perfectly. Her guns had fired continuously with devastating effect. Her fire control had been exemplary under impossible conditions. But when 40 aircraft attack a single destroyer simultaneously, mathematics become destiny regardless of training or courage. Captain Rikihei Inaguchi, who had helped develop kamikaze tactics, wrote after the war about radar picket battles with grudging professional respect. The American destroyers fought with incredible courage. Their radar gave them advantages we had not anticipated fully. They could see our aircraft forming up over our own airfields. They tracked us across hundreds of miles of ocean. Their fire control was devastating in its accuracy. But he also noted a critical observation that revealed the futility of Japanese strategy. We believed the radar pickets were vulnerable because of their isolation from the main fleet. We were wrong. The radar connected them to a defensive network that stretched across the entire operation. When we attacked a single destroyer, we faced coordinated defense of dozens of ships and hundreds of aircraft. The technological gap had become insurmountable. Japanese pilots flying obsolete aircraft with minimal training faced radar-directed guns firing proximity-fused shells with mathematical precision. American fighter aircraft vectored by shipboard controllers intercepted raids 50 miles from their targets. Electronic warfare had replaced visual combat entirely. The psychological impact on Japanese operations was equally devastating as the physical destruction. Pilots who had expected to find scattered, surprised targets instead encountered precisely coordinated defenses. Radar operators in air-conditioned compartments tracked their approaches from takeoff to impact. Fighter directors, speaking calmly into radio handsets, orchestrated their destruction with mathematical precision. The age of the warrior had ended abruptly. The age of the technician had begun with electronic systems determining outcomes more decisively than individual courage or sacrifice. By May 11th, Japanese naval commanders had modified their tactics in response to radar picket effectiveness. Attacks would concentrate on stations where weather degraded radar performance. Low-altitude approaches used terrain masking from nearby islands. Window chaff was dispensed to create false radar returns. Electronic warfare had evolved on both sides of the technological divide. But the Americans continued improving their systems faster than the Japanese could develop effective countermeasures. New SP height-finding radars eliminated blind spots in vertical coverage. Improved IFF systems prevented friendly fire incidents during chaotic engagements. Data links between ships allowed coordinated defense of multiple stations simultaneously. The technological advantage accelerated rather than diminished as American industrial capacity reached full production. The destroyer Hugh W. Hadley at Picket Station 15 demonstrated evolved defensive capability on May 11th. Under attack by over 150 kamikazes and conventional aircraft in multiple waves, Hadley's CIC managed 6 separate radar plots simultaneously, while directing 12 CAPI fighters and coordinating gunfire with 3 supporting ships. The result was 23 enemy aircraft destroyed. Hadley severely damaged, but afloat. 28 dead, 67 wounded. Without radar, the outcome would have been complete annihilation of all ships in the formation. Commander Mullaney, Hadley's captain, would later report with characteristic understatement, "Radar picket duty was the naval equivalent of the infantry point man, out front, alone, and first to get hit." But unlike the infantry point man who could only see a few yards ahead, our radar gave us the eyes of an eagle. We could see death coming from 50 miles away and prepare to meet it. The industrial implications were equally decisive in determining ultimate victory. American shipyards were producing new radar sets at rates exceeding 200 per month. Japanese aircraft production had fallen to fewer than 500 planes monthly, most of obsolete design. The mathematical equation was inexorable and increasingly favorable to American forces. American technology was advancing faster than Japanese pilots could be trained to counter it. Each destroyed Kamikaze represented months of training investment that could not be replaced given resource constraints. Each damaged American destroyer returned to service with improved equipment and experienced crews who passed knowledge to replacement personnel. The attrition warfare that Japanese commanders had calculated would exhaust American resolve instead demonstrated American industrial supremacy beyond imagination. On June 22, 1945, organized Japanese resistance on Okinawa ended after 3 months of continuous combat. The radar picket stations had been operational for 90 days of continuous operations. During that period, they had tracked thousands of air attacks, vectored fighters to intercept over 1,900 raids, and directly engaged approximately 600 kamikaze aircraft that penetrated to attack positions. The strategic implications transformed Pacific warfare planning completely. Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan, incorporated massive radar picket lines based directly on Okinawa experiences. Hundreds of destroyers equipped with latest radar systems would create electronic barriers around invasion fleets. Fighter direction would be centralized in purpose-built command ships with enhanced communications capability. The Japanese homeland would face not individual ship defenses, but integrated air defense networks spanning hundreds of miles with overlapping coverage zones. Admiral Matome Ugaki, commander of the 5th Air Fleet, made his final assessment before conducting his own kamikaze attack on August 15, 1945. The American radar pickets have created an invisible wall around their forces. Our pilots crash against this wall like birds against glass. We see the target, but cannot reach it through their electronic defenses. Technology has defeated spirit. The atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki ended the war before Operation Downfall could test the evolved radar picket concept against the Japanese homeland. USS Laffey survived the war and served for another 30 years, eventually becoming a museum ship preserved for future generations. Her radar arrays, though primitive by modern standards, had represented a revolution in naval warfare capability. The ability to see beyond visual range, to track multiple targets simultaneously, to direct weapons with mathematical precision had changed combat forever. No future war would be fought without electronic systems determining outcomes more decisively than traditional weapons or tactics. Commander Becton, reflecting on the radar picket experience, provided crucial insight into warfare's future direction. We proved at Okinawa that wars would no longer be won by the side with the bravest warriors or the most willing to sacrifice everything. Wars would be won by the side with the best technology and the industrial capacity to produce it in overwhelming quantities. The radar picket destroyers were not just ships performing defensive missions. They were the embodiment of American technical superiority, translated into tactical advantage. The human cost had been terrible beyond measure. Nearly 5,000 American naval personnel killed or wounded on radar picket duty alone. Nearly 2,000 kamikaze sorties flown against the picket stations. Hundreds of young Japanese pilots crashed into the sea, achieving nothing but their own deaths. But from this sacrifice emerged new understanding of warfare's evolution. Electronic systems would determine future battles more decisively than traditional factors. Information superiority would prove more decisive than raw firepower or numerical advantage. The ability to process and act on data faster than an opponent would become the ultimate weapon in all future conflicts. The radar picket destroyers had not just defended against kamikazes with remarkable success. They had demonstrated the future of warfare in all its technological complexity. In the depths of the Pacific Ocean, dozens of destroyers rest on the ocean floor, alongside hundreds of Japanese aircraft. Their crews are honored by both sides for displaying courage in the face of impossible odds and mathematical certainty of death. But their sacrifice marked more than heroism in combat. It marked the moment when technology became the dominant factor in warfare outcomes. The moment when radar operators in darkened combat information centers became more important than admirals on bridge wings making tactical decisions. The moment when mathematical calculations replaced warrior intuition in determining victory or defeat. The future belonged to nations capable of producing sophisticated electronics and training operators to use them effectively under combat conditions. The radar picket destroyers of Okinawa had not just won a crucial battle in the Pacific War. They had revealed the nature of all future conflicts in the electronic age. The invisible electronic battlefield would determine victory more decisively than visible weapons or traditional tactics. The nation, with superior sensors, processors, and data links, would dominate future warfare regardless of other factors. The age of electronic warfare had begun, written in steel and blood of radar picket destroyers that stood between kamikazes and the American fleet. Their legacy lives not in their armor plating or gun batteries, but in the radar arrays that gave them power to see death approaching from beyond the horizon and the technology to defeat it through mathematical precision rather than individual heroism alone.